Genau, der Titel des Finales ist Intelligent Content Management for Media Workflows. An dem Titel, der Vortrag wird auch in Englisch sein, obwohl das kann man erklären, der eine Kollege, der eine Kollege, der hier sitzt, ist Amerikaner, spricht Deutsch, er wohnt aber schon lange hier. Fange ich mal an, bevor Tom online ist. Der Chris Wright, viele hier kennen ihn. Es klingt nicht despektierlich, aber ein Oldtimer mit 30 Jahren Erfahrung, Fernsehkommunikationsbereich. Ich fand das total witzig. Also sag mal, was du so gemacht hast. Und er war Journalist, ja, ist von USA nach Europa gekommen, war bei der Deutschen Welle, ORF, WDR, Sky, PBS, CBS. Und später gründete er ein eigenes Unternehmen, um Computerfaxgeräte an führende Werbeagenturen von Procter & Gamble zu vermarkten. Daraus lernte dann Chris irgendwann Telestream kennen, in den Anfängen. Und hat letztendlich dazu beigetragen, die Marke, ja, damals Flip Factory für viele, das sind ja schon ein paar, die eine lange Historie mit Telestream haben, im Bereich in ganz Europa, Nahen Osten, Afrika kontinuierlich aufzubauen. Und so sind wir auch damals zusammengekommen. Also nicht, dass ich das schon 30 Jahre mache, aber es gibt bei uns... ja, wie gestern. Es gibt bei uns im Office von Peter und mir gibt es so eine Vitrine. Und jeder, der die Vitrine sieht, bleibt sich stehen, oh, da ist alles drin. Ja. Und da ist unter anderem drin Super 8 und ein 40 Megabyte Laufwerk, Festplatte und ein Clip-Mail. Bediengerät. Ja.
Ein Videofaxgerät.
Ein Videofaxgerät, genau. So, das zu Chris. Mittlerweile ist Tom auch online. Tom ist uns zugeschaltet von der Ostküste. Und Tom hat vorgegeben, er möchte den Vortrag lieber in Englisch halten, weil er schon so lange da drüben ist und sich da ein bisschen wohler fühlt.
Probably because Tom doesn't like my German. I don't know.
Ja, also Tom, ganz kurz zu Tom. Tom ist mittlerweile auch 13 Jahre bei Telestream. Früher war er VP of Sales Engineering und damit halt auch unterwegs in der ganzen Welt, um Lösungen für Workflow und Videoproduktion zu spezifizieren, zu implementieren, umzusetzen. Mittlerweile hat er das Thema, das Ganze zu gucken, wie man das in Cloud-Infrastrukturen umsetzt, ohne dass wir die gleichzeitige Nutzung für On-Prem-Lösungen zu minimieren. Und in dem Titel heute, an dem abschließenden Thema geht es darum, ich hatte es erwähnt, Intelligent Content Management for Media Workflows. Es geht letztendlich um ein neues Produkt, was an den Start geht. Das ist der Content Conductor, der auf den Diva Core aufbaut. Und was man letztendlich damit erreichen will, ist, dass man Content, der heute nicht in klassischen LTO oder Object Storage lokal gehandelt wird, sondern überall auch dort in verschiedenen Cloud-Instanzen liegt. Und der Content Conductor halt neben der Verwaltung des Archivs auch Management-Funktionalitäten und auch Workflow-Optionen bietet. Also für alle die, ich glaube, ein Kunde sitzt der hat Diva im Einsatz, wird Content Conductor das nächste Produkt-Update, einer der nächsten Produkt-Updates werden. Ja, und zu sagen, okay, wo sortiert sich das ein? Dann haben wir den Martin Schmidt hier noch da hinten von Telestream. Deutsch. Er ist aber also gestern auch schon hier gewesen. Und dann freue ich mich auf euren Vortrag. Bitte schön.
Great, I'll start it off. So thank you first, Frank and Peter and everyone at Notorium. You've done a great job organizing NETS. And I think everyone here has done a great job proving that kosher beer really is nutritious because you're all awake and ready. And thanks for all of the great attention and also for last night's discussions, which were good. One of the reasons we chose content management today was to give a chance to talk about maybe some areas that you're not aware of that Telestream's active in. And we've been quite active in the last few years doing this, being involved in the entire Diva family, but also acquiring the Mastech company. And that's brought us a lot into storage areas. And so when we were discussing this with Frank, we were talking about, well, maybe it'd be interesting to bring Tom in the room, and Tom, who's working all the time all over the world for us in his capacity in his role, is talking to customers from many different places of the globe about many of the topics we've already talked about today. But he just thought, well, maybe Tom could give you a good way to run through kind of some of the things that brush by his desk all the time, and just give you a quick run in that area that in some respects includes file-based work, but live work and test and measurement and IP and AI and all of the things that we've been talking about these last 2 days. So Tom, if you're with us and you've got your Starbucks coffee all ready for the day, I'll give you the word.
Yeah, can you hear me, guys? Yes. Oh, yeah, I hear an echo. All right, let me actually share the presentation. I think that's what we said, how we're going to do that. So let's see if that works properly. So let's see, and presentation mode. Can you guys see my screen, and can you see the PowerPoint just in presentation mode without anything around it?
Lots of yeses.
All right. Okay. Okay, cool. Okay, first, thank you very much, and good afternoon. So as Chris and Frank said, I'm Tom Pflaum. I work for Telestream, have been working here since 2010. And at this point, I'm in a role of a product manager for the Telestream file-based products, let's call it like that. So this is Vantage as well as Content Conductor, what I will talk about today. So just a quick overview. I want to basically, people think of content management mainly as something that is managing libraries, managing LTO libraries, and products like Diva, like Mastor, like FlashNet were always used, and that was basically the purpose of these products. Now, how does content management now fit into a more modern deployment that includes cloud-based storage, blob storage, object storage in the cloud? How does content management fit into that, and why do you still need it? So that is sort of the focus of this presentation, and then also, why do I want content management to move content into the cloud for me or manage content in the cloud for me? So let me start with one statement that is basically important. As if you want to process media in the cloud, you need the media in the cloud already. It does not make a lot of sense to basically start moving the media at the moment when you decide to do any type of processing on the media in the cloud. That just takes a long time, and it's kind of too ad hoc and probably won't quite work. So let me give you an example. What is often talked about is like people have on-prem systems, let's say a Vantage system that does media encoding, media processing, whatever it is that needs to be done. And people talk about, oh, I'm just going to use the cloud to get going with cloud deployments. I'm just going to burst into the cloud. And what people have in mind when they think about bursting into the cloud, the initial idea is, well, I've got my media on-prem, I'm running out of processing capacity on-prem, so why don't I just basically move the media up, process in the cloud, move it back down? That is probably not the most efficient way of doing this, because uploading the files, well, takes time. It probably takes as long to upload the file to S3 to blob storage or any kind of object storage as it does to actually do the processing. So now, sure, there's still some benefits in that, but there's a lot of data movement in there. One other problem is, if you do this, you also have to consider the egress costs. If you pull media down out of object storage, a cost is usually charged by the provider of the object storage. So this approach is probably not the best one. So in order to really use the cloud, even for bursting, you need your on-prem storage already, or your on-prem media already replicated in object storage. How do you do that? And this is where content management comes in a cloud environment. So I can have a system, and I'm going to be talking about Content Conductor here, a Telestream product, that will basically implement policies that make it so that data gets replicated correctly, so that this bursting now actually becomes a possibility of to do this efficiently. So let me talk a little bit more about how we view content management in this new world. So you probably still have your LTO type libraries. They're not going away. You have them as probably a backup, a part of your backup strategy, part of all of that, and you're moving to the cloud. You move some of these parts to the cloud. You also have spinning disk storage, on-prem spinning disk storage. So we view content management as sort of this single piece of glass where you can basically look at one location and you can see all your media, no matter what location it's actually stored on. And then in addition to that, I can implement storage policies that the content management system will take care of. So for example, it'll say, hey, this is product that I might use in a burst workflow that I might need in the cloud. So have a storage policy that automatically moves the media up to the cloud. Or this is important media. My storage policy says I want this on LTO storage, still in my library, in my vault, somewhere in the basement. And I also want that on S3, on object storage. And you can implement these policies, basically that this automatically the data gets replicated, it gets checksummed, it makes sure that all these copies are correct. You have the right number of copies available for that. So, but it manages all these various storage locations that you have and provides you one single interface to kind of look what's going on there.
Tom, if I can interrupt you just real quickly with a question. Today we've been talking a lot about trying to judge whether something created by AI came from the computer or was it a real voice. We also had just an example recently where we're starting to interact in and out of the cloud in ways where you don't really know where it is. At what point is it still important to know where your storage is? And if you're managing this approach, do you need to get it to a point where you just let it go and run on its own and don't worry about where it is? Or when does that actually happen?
I mean, the idea, ideally, I mean, having it automatic would always be a kind of the goal of that. And this is where these storage policies come into play, where you basically say like, hey, this type of media, I want to make sure it is available in the cloud as well, and it is available on-prem. So, I mean, the goal is to make it as automatic as you possibly can. So you don't really have to worry about that your media is in the right location on where you want to do the processing.
So as that becomes more complex, something like Content Conductor becomes more important? Correct.
That's exactly it. I mean, you might use multiple cloud providers, right? You might use, and there might be a reason why you use multiple cloud providers. So now you have to deal with stuff like, okay, I want to have my media replicated on cloud provider A, and I want it on cloud provider B. Within cloud providers, as you know, there's different storage tiers as well. There's deep archive storage where it takes longer to get access to the files, but it's cheaper. And then there's also more accessible blob storage, more accessible storage where you can basically get the data quicker. So the cloud just adds a whole other tier collection of storage locations that you want to make sure you use efficiently. You also always need to consider egress in these projects. So typically, when you restore content out of a cloud provider and bring it back on-prem, egress costs become important. Okay, so I just started talking about egress costs. So how does a content management system, or in this case, content conductor, how does it help with egress costs? As I said, first you need to manage all these tiers and kind of try and avoid storage operations that cross boundaries where egress gets applied. Where it becomes actually where it costs money to move the files around. And we're talking media files, probably mezzanine files, master files, so they're big files. So you're moving, I don't know, hundreds of gigabytes of data potentially if you move, a high quality television show across. So Content Conductor can help with first minimizing that, but also a technology that was always sort of a big deal with LTO storage and still is something called partial restore. So it's basically on tapes. The idea was, well, okay, if I only need like 5 minutes out of a 2-hour recording of a soccer game, well, why do I have to restore this entire file over, then clip that little piece out of it and then get rid of it altogether? For LTO tape, this was a performance improvement. In the cloud, that partial restore operation becomes important again. So it's kind of, it's old technology, but it makes still sense in this new environment. So when I basically restore out of object storage, and I only need 5 minutes, well, I only restore these 5 minutes out of the file, and then I pull only those across that barrier where egress costs occur. So I'm actually moving less data across the files.
And avoiding the spinning wheel, right? So just like in streaming and in many other operations, partial restore helped us not have to look toward the blinking light. Same thing now is we don't have to wait. So you don't want to wait, and you don't want to pay for the data transfer either. So.
Correct, exactly. So let me talk, I think I mentioned most of it on the slide. So as I mentioned again, there's a single interface that gives you one view into all these different storage locations. And I just want to reiterate that the cloud is not just one. There are multiple tiers, there are multiple regions that you might be interested in keeping the media in as well. So the infrastructure in the cloud can be quite complicated. So it is nice to have a single interface that shows you all of those. It shows you what type of storage it is, what location it is, and kind of things like that, all on one single screen. I talked about the lowering egress fees, first by avoiding unnecessary data movement, and also the partial restore approach I was talked about. Better discoverability, basically, we just index it. It's a little bit easier to find what you have because we store metadata along as well. We're not replacing a MAM here. Actually, I'll get into the point that we expect Content Conductor to be integrated with a MAM as a middleware layer, if you have a MAM that basically manages this aspect, the data movement aspect of your workflow. I talked about the automatic workflow, and I'll talk about how you can preview video on the next slide. As I mentioned here, we expect this to be integrated with media asset management systems. If you have a MAM in place, the idea of this content conductor or the content management layer is not to replace the MAM, at least not for big deployments or big installations. There's a lot of MAM needs to do that's not really directly tied to moving media files around. Of course, you have to find them. So what we have with the Content Conductor, it has a very flexible API, and while Content Conductor is a new product, it builds on top of the sort of legacy. That's not a good name, but the products that we have, Diva, as well as Mastor, as well as FlashNet, all these companies all these products that Telestream has. It provides this API, and given integration, we counted a while. There's probably literally 500 systems that we're aware of that are actually controlling one of our content management products, Content Conductor, via the APIs. So, I mean, this is not to replace a MAM in general. It's just a layer below that really focuses on moving files around and managing just a replication and the policies of it. Of course, for this, you also want it to be scalable. You know, you want on-prem, you can have multiple LTO tape libraries, you can have many different cloud locations all pulled together in a sort of distributed deployment of Content Conductor, and you can pull this still all up in one user interface. And as I said, one new feature here is that you can actually search. You can add metadata if you have metadata that can be derived or that gets provided when you check in content into the content management system. There's now, you know, a full text search that helps you find stuff. Again, not to replace a MAM, but it's just sort of maybe some part of the operation doesn't really need the full MAM. You just want to get just some simple search going to find a piece of content.
For those who are aware, the Diva engine offers the backbone to the system, but it's not really a replacement of a media asset management system, nor is it true orchestration either. What is it? Kind of something in between, or do other orchestration tools like Vantage or SDVI connect and link into something like Content Conductor?
Yeah, they can absolutely will, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about Vantage. Actually, ties into the Content Conductor thing next. But if you have somebody like an SDVI or just a cloud-based MAM, let's say, there's still your on-prem media that still needs to be managed, right? And they would basically connect using the API and use Content Conductor as kind of middleware to basically enable the discovery and management of the media files. Let me give you a little example of what what people are using with it. So, for example, we have one customer that's a sports team, not a sports broadcaster, but a sports team. They basically just have a very simple problem, well, there's just a lot of media that they're getting right now. They are not a broadcaster, so a MAM is kind of overkill for them in that case. So they use basically Content Conductor to as a way to just basically take all the media that's coming in, all the camera cards, all the social media, user-generated video, put that all into a system, put a little bit of tagging, a little bit of metadata on top of it, and then you have an interface where you can find your content and make sure you have it archived properly, and you have copies where you need them. Okay, that's just the same thing. So let me tell you a little bit more about kind of moving to the cloud. What are other challenges? If you move your files to S3 storage, they become very hard to look at. So if I've got a big file, I mentioned before, like 100 gigabyte file that I have Content Manager move it off to S3 storage. How do I know what this file is? How can I play this file? So if I've got a MAM, you might have a relatively simple answer. The MAM might create proxies, and you can kind of watch these proxies. Okay, that's a feature of the MAM, but if you don't have the MAM, you want to change the MAM, you don't want to rely on the MAM, whatever it is, we have, there's a product or a feature that's actually kind of part of Content Conductor called Glim. And what Glim is a piece of software that you can deploy, let's say, in the cloud, and it will play video off of S3 storage, and it'll stream it on the fly to your web browser. You can see kind of a screenshot here. In a bit rate and a format that the browser can just display. So basically, Glim will create a proxy on the fly. So you can basically pull up any media on S3, and it's really pretty much any media that Telestream can process, which is the vast majority of media files that are out there. And it'll then, on the fly, create a single bitrate HLS proxy that will be streamed to your browser, and you can see the interface down here. And it's got features like showing you the audio levels, like the bars moving up and down. It will show you subtitles. It will show you how many audio tracks there are, properties of the video. You can scrub through the file quickly back and forth. And as I said, there's no proxy, so you don't need to store the proxy, and in particular, you don't need to manage the proxy, because I think probably some of you are kind of aware of the challenge that if the proxy becomes out of sync with the media file, something went wrong. That can't happen here because the file gets the proxy, or the proxy stream in this case, gets generated on the fly. And this is part of GLIM as well.
Yeah, as we all know, things are changing a lot, right, Tom? So as a result of the pandemic, we had people at home working, and they weren't always connected to their MAM system. So this is addressing that in terms of if we're going to move things to another source of data and data flow, I can actually access streams that are on the main file that we're looking at, and then I can determine what stream quality I'm going to receive that in. So GLIM can, various tiers of quality can be selected as you interact with the system. But you're also not spending cycles creating proxy files or doing anything like that. So it's kind of an in-between that allows you to disengage from that on-premises only approach. And as we move to more hybrid solutions like that, that's exactly the kind of tool we need to interact on many different levels, not just storage management, but in other preparation and content creation levels.
Exactly. So, okay, now we do have all our media in on-prem and in the cloud, and we can play the video. Now, of course, now I need to process the video files. They're not there just to have copies. We actually want to do something to them. And a lot of people in the room, I assume, are familiar with Vantage or are customers of Vantage. And Vantage is a system that is designed to process video, transcode video, analyze video, standards convert video, whatever all the things are that Vantage is doing on-prem. So you're basically building these workflows. Let me actually do this slide. So you're building these workflows actually on-prem that basically say, like, hey, look at my source files and figure out the number of audio tracks. Based on that, I'll encode it in one way. If it's got 7.1 and there's a DAM file sitting next to it, I'll make Adobe Atmos version of the file. So you can build these workflows here. What Telestream now offers is something called Vantage Cloud. What is Vantage Cloud? You can actually take these workflows, upload them to Telestream's Vantage Cloud SaaS service, and now you can run these in the cloud. You don't need an on-prem Vantage system. You just upload the workflows that you already have built on-prem. You upload it to the cloud, and you can see this down here. And now you can basically run these same workflows in the cloud. Why would I want to run them in the cloud? Well, I would just mention earlier, we use content management to move the media to the cloud. And now I can run the exact same processes that I ran on-prem, I can run them in the cloud. Going back to my initial example, now, of course, it becomes a lot easier to do this bursting workflow that people want to do. So Vantage Cloud is a SaaS service that Telestream offers, and you can just upload workflows and have all the same capabilities. It's exactly the same transcode libraries. It's the same, we call it the Telestream Media Framework that creates the IMF files, MXF files, QuickTime, Avid media files that's running in the cloud is the same as what's running on-prem, same source code. So basically that is Vantage Cloud. One other thing that we actually get a lot of interest in is, and that is something that's always been kind of on-prem, people have been doing it on and off, and that is automatic file-based quality control, basically QC. Those are products like VidChecker that we had on-prem. But this becomes actually we noticed this to be very interesting for people wanting to use this in the cloud. So the idea there is that, hey, I'm moving all my media into the cloud and I have it there. Now I have these basically, quote unquote, unlimited resources of compute. It does cost money, obviously, but still there is a lot of resources. So I can just run a file-based QC process on my on the media that I have in the cloud, and that file-based QC can take different views. I might just be scanning my library, basically go through my library and make sure that, hey, everything supposed to in this library is supposed to be 5.1 audio. Is it? right? I just run tests and I just scan the library. That's just an example. You might scan for other things, right? Other subtitles present, all that kind of stuff. You can use qualify in that context. You can also use it to basically make it part of your media supply chain. So basically, files get delivered to you. Let's say from your production partners, they deliver you a show. Well, how do they deliver files? They're probably going to upload them somewhere. Let's assume that somewhere is in the cloud. Then you can basically run qualify straight in the cloud on this input and make sure that they meet your delivery specifications, right? I mean that the bit rates are right, the audio layout is correct, all that kind of stuff. So we're seeing a lot of interest in people running basically file QC in the cloud, just because it's easy to turn on. There's additional resources, and it just improves kind of the quality of your product. It just is this extra step that kind of makes it sure that what you deliver actually meets the requirements and meets your standards of delivery. Things like regulatory requirements like audio loudness can be checked. The Harding test for epilepsy checks can be tested. Just kind of things like that. I mean, there's a lot of features that the file-based QC system can do.
Tom, we know
Yeah.
the distribution chain is different in every market that we're active in, right? So we're seeing companies and organizations in different phases of that. I think earlier we said, well, how do you decide where you're going to actually process? And this is kind of giving you that step between two worlds. So there's the on-premises world, and then there's the question of, well, how in the world would I ever do that type of quality check in the cloud? That's what Qualify allows you to do, is to give access in those realms to where the storage is. What leads me to that question is because all of us here are in different stages in our organizations as to where we're going to go. Some of us, we just need to get ideas to see what's happening. Is anybody out there really doing 100% cloud distro now, where this is the only way you can check something? I stumped him.
Oh, are you asking me? Sorry,
It's a
I thought
question.
you were asking the audience. I apologize. You're kind of absolutely right. Yes, there are some customers that are pretty much all cloud or as much cloud as they can be.
So our content over here is that we haven't run across that yet. I don't know anyone in the DACH market yet that's 100% in the cloud, and probably won't be. So we're thinking things are going to take a while to get there. Is that one way that we can kind of hybrid move content management with cloud and being on the ground at the same time?
That would be the idea. I mean, what I mentioned, the people that are doing in the cloud, that's the whole thing, and I'm sure you're familiar with that, like doing the play out in the cloud. Once you do that and you get to that point, probably most of your production and supply chain will be in the cloud at that point. Now, there are not too many broadcasters that are doing that. So as far as taking steps, that's what we're typically seeing. And I'm going to go through some more examples, basically, of people that are how they basically move some of their production workflows into the cloud on the next slide. But you're absolutely correct, Chris. It is a kind of one step at a time type of an approach. It is not okay, I flip a switch and I'm going to be in the cloud. That's just not how it works. Okay.
Great.
Sorry, Chris?
Great. No, I said great. Keep going.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Cool, thank you. So let me tell you about I just want to go just through some use cases, right? Like, so kind of how are people basically moving to the cloud? As I said, it's usually not a flip a switch, everything moves over. It's also not typically an ad hoc type of a thing. So you typically plan it, right? So you want to make sure, obviously, you want to make sure that your media is where you need it to be. So if you want to process in the cloud and your service provider, let's say, is Amazon, I guess Microsoft, And you want to make sure your media is there already. That's where content management helps you. So you basically need a system that makes sure your media is where you want it to be. Then you basically pick some workflows and you move these workflows to the cloud. Let me talk to you about one of the broadcasters that we have. I mean, that's NBC. So basically, they have on-prem. They have a big deployment of Vantage systems that they had probably for a decade. And that system is doing their distribution workflows. This is NBC delivering content to their customers. I don't know, Canal Plus in France or whatever. Probably somebody in Germany as well. So all in all, they have 500 workflows for this because each of their partners wants a slightly different flavor of the video. Someone bars and tones at the front, someone the Spanish audio and audio track 1 and 2, kind of things like that. So bottom line, there's 500 workflows, probably one for each distribution partner and probably multiple for them. So they decided that we want to move this to the cloud. The driver actually was they were being told that they are going to move the default mezzanine format to UHD. So UHD, HDR type workflows. And they did not want to build out their data center to support this, what's at least 4x the processing time that's required to go from HD to UHD. So basically, we took these 500 workflows that they have and we moved them over to Vantage Cloud, what I mentioned earlier. So they, of course, had some changes to do, right? Like the API. So they did not drive these 500 workflows by hand. There is there's a media asset management system mediator that's actually driving these workflows. This needed to be retooled so that it talks to the cloud as well. But ultimately, these 500 workflows then moved to the cloud, and you didn't have to rebuild every single one of them. And so basically, this is now in the process of basically the media, all these masters are now sitting up in the cloud and they're still on-prem. So they're still, the on-prem system has not been shut down because we're still in the transition period. But slowly they're going to ramping up the cloud usage. As I mentioned, they're going to switch to UHD as the content becomes available in UHD and then run the distribution workflow in the cloud. So that's one idea or one example of how basically people move to the cloud, but it has to start, as I mentioned earlier, with getting the media where it needs to be. And that's where the content management part plays in.
Tom, we have about 5 minutes, and I just wanted to ask you on this, and if we've got one more example that you've got. And this one's a little different from that. So the idea is, we mentioned why would you manage storage? There's lots of benefits for that. Some of the discussions we had here were replication of the same data and the cost that has when you can't find it, right? So access with the cloud is to help make it easier for us to find what we need, to work with it regardless of where it is. And but also there's a cost factor to that in your second example. So maybe you could tell us about that.
Right. So, I mean, the second example, it's also something that you can do in the cloud, and I kind of mentioned this because this might be something that you wouldn't be doing on-prem, quite frankly. So this is a customer that basically looked at their storage cost in the cloud and kind of went, hey, this is kind of expensive. There's just a lot of data sitting there. What can we do about it? So they started looking at their files and they realized, well, these archive files, there's a lot of black in them. They're historic files and people just put some handles at the front, handle at the back, then somebody else produces, they put another handle at the front and another handle in the back. So at the end of the day, you end up with a fair amount of black in these files. So when you have it on LTO, you kind of deal with it, right? Because it's, but in the cloud, now you have the ability to actually access the content a little bit more quicker than off an LTO drive. And so what they realized, they built basically a Vantage workflow, and Vantage basically took the files, analyzed the files, identified basically black segments in the files, and then set up a transcode operation or direct convert operation that basically removes this black from the video. As you know, these are production formats that they're typically constant bitrate files. So black takes as many bits as actual video does. So they actually ran in this part of the archive. They actually found a 30% savings, basically based on that, of just basically cleaning up this media file. Now, not only are you now saving money, the files also become easier to manage because they're smaller. They're also 30% smaller. So if you pull them into your editor, because you want to do something with them, it's also 30% faster, just because there's just less to do. And this is a workflow that you can do in the cloud. You probably, on-prem, you probably wouldn't necessarily have the equipment or the system to just have the additional capacity to kind of run a job like that. You have your Vantage system, typically, you have it dialed in. It does what it needs to do. You probably don't want to just go, hey, let's run this a storage optimization process on the system. But in the cloud, you have additional resources that you can bring up kind of on a constant, on-demand basis. And so you can run projects like that and then end up with less storage and easier to manage files. So that's another reason why you want to move to the cloud. You can do things that you probably wouldn't be doing on-prem. Okay, Chris, any more questions before
Does anyone have any questions for
up?
Tom? Everyone is eager to end the day, but it's been good to talk to you.
I know.
How would you summarize where you are in this stage?
Putting everybody to sleep.
No, thanks. You do want to summarize, though, right? So bring up.
I do. So before, I'll let you go to. I don't know. It's probably time to kind of have some drinks. First off, I want to summarize what I talked about. So you need copies of media in multiple locations, meaning on-prem and in the cloud, if you realistically want to do processing in the cloud. As I said, people that are completely in the cloud are rare, and it'll probably take a long time to get there. Maybe never. Maybe that's not the way that's going to play out. But if you want to do on-prem processing and processing in the cloud, you need copies of that in multiple locations. Content management is the piece that offers you that single kind of pane of glass to make sure you know where your media is. You can implement automatic rules that basically make sure the media is where you need it to do. So that's why you need content management in this context. The whole processing tools that you have available in the cloud, there is the same tools that you have on-prem are available in the cloud, but because you're using on-demand compute resources, there might be workflows that make sense to run in the cloud that you might not do on-prem. I talked about the QC, in-depth QC. I talked about things like the storage optimization product. And then one other thing I want to mention, that if you've got your media in the cloud, how the content management or Content Conductor in particular can help you to actually make sure the media is what it says it is. So you can look in there and it says, it's a certain sporting event, and you can quickly pull it up just to make sure that's actually correct, and that's where the GLIMP layer comes in. All right, and that wraps it up. Chris, any questions after the summary?
There's only one comment I'd add to that is that, we've talked about this as a step into the digital distribution chain, and Telestream now has customers that are delivering internationally in a digital distribution chain. But an easy way to describe that without the D's and blah, is to it's a lot of copies, put a lot of different places. So effective digital distribution is managing where copies are and where they are when they are. That's what it is. So if we can keep an idea of where we are all the time in the new virtualized world, we'll be, I think, one step further in getting things together. I'll leave you now. I have no funny tricks or polls or anything like that. But I just will ask you, presence of body is one thing. We've all been able to get together and look at each other. My question is, do you know your presence digitally? Where is your data and where are you? I've noticed in the last 2 days I've been in London, England with you all in the Wi-Fi. And so take a look at where we are, and our presence of knowing where we are is always important, but it's also something we could be managed and befriend to our advantage in both business and personally. So I think it's an exciting change that we're seeing, right, Tom? It's happening at different stages everywhere, and we're interested to hear where you want to take it. So thanks for your time. Thanks for the attention and for sitting through the final presentation of a good NETS.
Yeah.
Thank you.